Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a beautiful day here, a fall day in Alexandria. Uh, First off, we want to send our support and prayers to the Hurricane Milton and the government agencies working, especially Northcom and 82nd. Got a little bias there, but that obviously is a national concern for all of us. I'm Riki Ellison. I'm the founder and chairman of the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance. Our whole sole purpose for the 20 years of existence is to make our nation and make the world a safer place through the development and deployment of missile defenses. This is our 62nd virtual on the missile defense of Israel. I've been 41 years ago, I can say, I was in a kibbutz in northern Israel and witnessed that rocket attack 41 years ago there. Have worked through President Reagan's administration, President Bush Sr.'s administration, where the MOU from the Strategic Defense Initiative for our allies was with UK, Japan, and Israel. And out of those three, Israel has been the foremost dominant, foremost developer, foremost active partner and ally for our nation on missile defense, and clearly say that they are the best in the world at it. And obviously, you don't want to be the best in the world at it because you're getting all the shots at you, but they've had to become the best in the world, and they are the best in the world at a layered missile defense capability. We have visited there with some of our guests with Shohat and Tal for the past 20 years. We were out there when we put out our Tippy-2 radar near the Sinai Desert. We've been there at Sadat when we first developed the Iron Dome 20 years ago, the Arrow, the David Sling, the Green Pine, and the MDAA Israeli test bed, and the development of these systems have been spectacular on it. And nobody can say that the capabilities are all there. The capabilities are all there to be able to intercept whatever Iran is throwing at them. So we're here to discuss what happened last Tuesday and the relevance of that to the world, not only to Israel, but to the world, because that looks the way real combat is happening, and it's happening in a way of overmatch. It's not happening that we don't have the right capabilities. We have the right capabilities. We just don't have the capacity. And we are using capacity that we're unable to produce as quickly as possible. And this is where Israel leads the world at on this, because they are judicious, they understand that, and they take more risk than any other nation in the world to let missiles go that aren't targeted specifically on infrastructures or on people. And that was developed with the Iron Dome system so they could be judicious with that aspect of it. And we're not that judicious. As we look at this thing that happened on Tuesday, you have the Israeli defenses in the back, but in front of that is CENTCOM and its allies, and Israel is part of that do the capabilities of sensing, warning, tracking, and intercepting prior to them getting into Israel. And we're using some of our best stuff, such as the SM-3 Block 1Bs off of ships to specifically hit systems. But this is the wrong end of the cost curve. That is a 10-to-1 cost ratio that we can't afford. We're doing this. This was only a couple hours of attack, and the amount of money spent on one side versus the other is completely lopsided. And you've got our government that's stopped the development and deployment or production of the SM-31Bs that they're using. So it is a really interesting place that, from our perspective, this is not being addressed correctly. we are not being addressed correctly. This threat, the capacity limitations that we'll put on Israel, put on ourselves because of this. So today's discussion is going to give you a very personal perspective from Israel with two great leaders there. Tal Inbar has been with us for 20 years, probably the leading expert in the world on our Iranian missile threat. Nobody better than him on that, and he's in Israel. And then we have Shachar, former Brigadier General of the commander of the Air Defense Forces, knew him when he was in charge of the Arrow. He's with Raphael, with a lot of the critical systems that are in play today, and he's here speaking from that perspective. And then we back off after that, and we go into the U.S. role in CENTCOM and the U.S. capabilities that are used to support that attack and shoot down what they can and do that. So I want to start off the discussion with the reality check of what exactly happened, and no better person to do that than Tal Inbar, who is our academic fellow and an MDAA board of advisor. Tal, you're all yours.
Thank you, Riki, and all the wonderful team for this event. And I can just hope to have such an event in the future with no regard to a missile attack in Israel. So I want to share you a little bit of what happened last week. So hopefully you could see some of my slides. And we're talking about a missile attack on Israel, the second time that Iran directly attacked Israel. The first was on April 14. And April 14 was a combined attack by UAVs, cruise missiles, and some ballistic missiles. And the second strike on October 1st was just the Iranian side just used ballistic missiles. So roughly 200 missiles or something in that vicinity of a number of missiles were fired in Israel at 7:31 p.m. And this was called by Iran True Promise 2. The attack was some kind of retaliation from Iran on the assassination of Hezbollah leader in Beirut and the death of IRGC general from the Quds Force. So roughly 200 ballistic missiles were launched by IRGC against several targets in Israel. Some 181 missiles reached their targets, or at least where some of them or most of them were engaged. And we know from official sources in the US that at least 12 SM-3 interceptors were used by two six-fleet missile destroyers, the USS Cole and the Baltic. And Nevatim Air Force Base for the second time was the main focus of the attack, together with two other Air Force bases. And according to Iranian sources and the international media, the Mossad HQ north of Tel Aviv. Like in April attack, it seems that all of the missiles were prepared underground, but they were launched above the ground from transporter erector launchers, meaning that with sufficient intelligence, the US, for example, could detect the preparation for such an attack several hours in advance. And the missile used were mostly the same as the first strike. We can see the IMAD, which is roughly 1,700 kilometers range. It is liquid propelled. Another liquid propulsion system for another missile is the Gather, which is an improved version of the Shahab 3. Haibar Shakan, which is solid propelled, roughly 1,400 kilometers range, were also used. And this is very interesting to note that in April, none of those missiles was able to penetrate Israeli airspace, and this time this was not the case. And According to Iranian sources, they used also the Fateh-1, which you can see now, which is Iranian first generation of hypersonic missile. I could rather call it aeroballistic reentry vehicle missile. So perhaps some of those missiles were used as well in this attack. And we can see some damage, at least to Nevatim, and no Israeli was hit during this attack. No casualties in Israel, but we can see some damage. You can see the F-35 shelters, and one of them got a direct hit, and some buildings were damaged in Nevatim, and the same is true for the another Air Force base, Tel Nof, and one of the missiles of Iran missed the base completely, and it landed inside a school in the city of Gedera. Again, no casualties, but nevertheless, it was quite an impact. And so the actual effect on the performance of the Israeli Air Force is minimal, if at all. We can talk about it. Minimal damage. Iran learned a lot, as we did, from the first attack, and instead of launching the first wave of attackers, very slow flying UAVs, they coordinated and orchestrated two salvos of missiles. So basically, in less than half an hour, more than 200 ballistic missiles made their way to Israel. And per Iranian point of view, the saturation of ballistic missile defense is their way of coping with countries with active defense, not only Israel, but in the region at all. So we can see a large volume of missiles in a short time, successful penetration of several missiles, at least to Nevatim region, and dramatic improvement of Khaybar Shakan ability to penetrate the Israeli airspace. And we don't know exactly from open sources the reason for that, but nevertheless, Shachar will elaborate a little bit as the best he can. So we can see here, this is the actual Iranian footage from the preparations of the attack. You can see Imad missiles underground, and people are now preparing the reentry vehicles and the warheads, and then they put it on the transporters and left the underground tunnels. So dozens of such missiles were used, and you can see this tunnel is also used for storage of second wave or third wave of ballistic missiles. But you can see also that the missiles near the walls of the tunnels are not ready for launch. But Iran has a lot of other missiles, and they have multiple sites like the one we can see here. So this is the Ghadar missile, less accurate with a CEP of several hundred meters, but nevertheless more than 500 kilograms of high explosives in the warhead of these missiles. Again, liquid propulsion. And you can see, of course, the propaganda side of this attack with posters of the IRGC general and Hassan Nasrallah from the Hezbollah, and some quotes from the Quran, handwritten on the missiles prior to the launch. So you can see here at least two missiles. Now, one is already launched, and the other one is about to be launched. And you can note also small fins on the re-entry vehicles, because this is a more accurate version of the Ghadar missile. This is not the Imad, this is an improved Ghadar. Nevertheless, the successful interceptions of most of those missiles is a proof that missile defense works, as we all know. So, and this is the Khaybar Shakan, and I just want to show you the skies over Tel Aviv. Actually, I was in Tel Aviv that night, and I had some I was a personal eyewitness to this attack. And you can see here intercepted missiles. So those are missiles that were already hit by some interceptors, probably aero missiles, or could be also SM-3 from the sea. And so you can see, for example, another angle, and this is the last slide that I want to share with you, because this is I think it is an amazing documentation of the attack from Jordan. So someone from Jordan caught on camera a lot of incoming missiles from Iran heading to Nevatim, basically. So the view is from east to west. So all in all, we can see that the attack was more heavily coordinated by Iran than the April attack. Only ballistic missiles and only military targets in Israel. So we also have to remember that the outcomes of this type of attack could be quite different if Iran will choose to fire a large barrage of ballistic missiles on a civilian target or a large city like Tel Aviv. But I leave you with this small introduction.
Yeah. Great presentation. I have two questions for you. What is the estimated cost of these Iranian attack? And why are they not using the Russian tactics of combining all their ballistics and all their drones, all their cruises together? Why are they simplifying this defense to expose what from your perspective? Because they could do a far more complex attack. Sure. They have chosen not to do that, just out of curiosity.
Yeah. So unfortunately, Iranian authorities don't give me some inside information, but I can estimate that they learned from the April attack that almost all of the UAVs and cruise missiles could easily be intercepted, as we saw on this attack, because you can intercept incoming UAVs and cruise missiles far from Israeli airspace using air-to-air missiles. Not just the Israeli Air Forces were coping with that threat. And this is one aspect. The other one is that if you want to coordinate the attack using at least 3 different systems with different speed, relatively slow speed UAVs, a little bit faster cruise, and then ballistic missiles. So you give the Israeli side and the US side a notice of 8 to 9 hours before the first wave of UAVs will come. So it is not effective. About the cost, we don't know the official number of how much is one ballistic missile, let's say a liquid propelled missile, but a missile is a missile everywhere. So you have the cost of materials and the work hours and guidance control and so on. So I believe that a large ballistic missile from Iran is at least $1 or $1.5 million if I will be very conservative in my estimation. So it is costly even to Iran, but we know that Iran invested decades of producing those missiles, and they have a large quantity underground, and they could be kept indefinitely because the conditions are very convenient for the missiles. And if you just keep the missiles not ready for use, you can cover it like a cocoon, so it could be saved for decades. But it's not a cheap missile for Iran.
Yeah, so you're talking about 200 to 300 million, basically loose on what they something like that. And yeah, okay, that's good to note, and I appreciate your thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, retired Brigadier General Shachar Shohat, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Hello from Israel. Thank you for having me. I would like to raise up a few points from the strategic level up to the operational level regarding this specific conflict and referring to the other conflicts that we see in the last decade. First of all, I would like to refer to the deterrence, or to the loss of deterrence that we can see. Deterrence is gained by having, let's say, attack capabilities or attack means, as wise the president once said, speak softly and carry a big stick. But it's not all. It's not enough to carry the big stick. You have to show your willingness to use it if it's necessary. And what we see in the last decade in the entire world and here in the region is the loss of the deterrence, and that derives to the conflict. We saw it in Europe, we see it here now in the Mediterranean, and though it's a vague thing, the deterrence, I think when the President of the United States is trying to ask Iran not to do something, and they are still taking the care to attack Israel like we saw a few days ago, I think it has to ring a bell somewhere. So Israeli, for the first time in the last 50 years or ever, is attacking simultaneously from 7 fronts. It started by the Hamas, moving forward to Hezbollah from the north, the Houthis from Yemen, the Iraqi militia from Iraq, from Iran, some Syrian, Lebanon fronts that having issue and within inside the territories, and that also emphasize the need of 360 degrees coverage to the state. We saw it in the attack of the palm oil in Aramco in Saudi Arabia. So you have to defend 360 degrees. The next thing I would like to emphasize is the need to defend the defender. We saw it in Ukraine, how they attacked the air defense system. And we saw it, unfortunately, here in the last, in our last conversation, we were talking about elevated sensor. Unfortunately, Israel lost its elevated sensor in this war. And that was a crucial tool for us. Of course, we can regain power and tools, but you must defend the defender. You have to put effort on that in order to use your tools correctly. Moving on to the length of the conflict. No swift victory anymore. Wars are taking time. We saw it more than 2 years in Russian-Ukraine war. We are now here more than a year in a war. We never dreamed about it. We thought that we can finish war within a few weeks. And that reflects the stock of ammunition that every country needs, the independent capability to produce during war more ammunition. This is not out of the shelf product. Sometimes it takes a year for long-lived items that you have to bring. So it emphasized the needs of the stock of interceptor or ammunition, and of course create some partnership with the other countries, alliances, like you can push or ask or borrow ammunition from allied in order to maintain a very long time of the war. Speaking about alliances, I mentioned in our last meeting, I don't remember when it was, maybe a year ago or so, and I said that here in the Middle East, we need something equivalent to NATO. I call it METO, Middle East treaty organization or treaty. I think the Middle East arena, and we kind of demonstrated in this conflict, need to cooperate in order to mitigate the challenge that we are having from Iran and its proxies. And I think this is a good time for Saudi and Kuwait and the Emirates and some other countries to join together on a defensive alliance in order to face the challenge that Tal just described very clearly. More than 300 elements in April time, and a few days ago, 200 tactical ballistic missile in one salvo in less than an hour, trying to saturate the defender. And fortunately, what we work on in the last few decades on the combined exercise of the Juniper Cobra, on the building cohesion, rules of engagement, tactics, doctrine, practice with the U.S. armed forces was worth and was proving itself. The efficiency of the Aegis ship that was mentioned by Tal was very important to mitigate this intense salvo that we face. Of course, no 100% of success, but we are pretty satisfied with the success and with the minimum damage that it creates. Almost not a loss of life from this attack. Of course, damage of the infrastructure, but all the capability of the Israel forces, offensive means Air Force, were kept during the entire night and the entire war here. So we kind of prevent most of the damage, and we could profit, even though it was maybe the most intense salvo that the world ever saw in the same time. Having said that, interoperability, you have to be able to plug and fight within the alliance. Of course, the technology provided now, but if you are doing it and prepare it and plan from in advance, so you can work as a team, and that's what happened, I think, this conflict. And maybe last but not least, I'm referring also to Tal's excellent presentation. The hypersonic threat is on the step door, and we have to take it seriously and accelerate our capability to mitigate that challenge. So overall, even though it was a very intense conflict, and I'm talking about 7 fronts, more than 1 year, I think we are also very proud of the fact that the Ben Gurion International Airport was not shut down for the entire war, even though few of the commercials, the airplane stopped flying to Israel, but the Israeli companies like El Al, Arkia, and the Emirates were still flying most of the time from Ben Gurion, and that I think also demonstrates our capability to keep our sky safe and to avoid the friendly fire, even though the massive attack that Israel was mitigating. So I think I will stop at that point.
Okay, thank you. You brought up some great points. I think the loss of deterrence is a great point. How, from your perspective, is that a balance between offense, defense? What is the solution with that big stick and how you display it? Because it's obviously not working in Ukraine or Israel in that. if you can speak to that a little bit, what your thought is on how you do this. Is there a special formula of more defense or more offense, or what is that? Or policy to allow you to strike ahead before these guys when you know they've got it and they're coming at you?
I can share my own perspective. I think Corky and JD maybe will do a better work for me. But I can say that you have to show your readiness to project the deterrence. And that means, I call it cut the grass. From time to time, you have to demonstrate the capability and your intent, honest intent to use it. But if you try to avoid any conflict and they are dragging you from a small elements of shooting near the border, then kidnapping someone, and you still don't retaliate strongly, that's the way you are trying to lose deterrence. And the Western world is eager to peace. He wants quiet, wants to have good life. Everybody wants to go to vacation, be in Hawaii. But in order to keep the world safety, you need to project your capability from time to time and not let, especially non-state organization, to grow. So you have from time to time to cut the grass.
And that's the edge where, on the other side of it, you brim to a world war or nuclear war on that back end. That's that edge you've got to play when you do that. Correct on that, and that's the chess game that's going on.
So I think if you do it on conventional means from time to time, maybe you will avoid in the future unconventional needs to use of a weapon system. But I think I'll let Corky to take it from here.
And then on your other point, the NATO, it's a good name, but I think we're doing that. I think CENTCOM's got 6 nations there that your Arab neighbors that you're in, and certainly we know those missiles fly over Saudi, they fly over Jordan, and there is capability or opportunity there to engage. But that seems to be moving in a positive place. I know it's going to take some time to do that. Is that correct? Is CENTCOM leading this with the 6 nations, or are you included with that in terms of the overall regional security? You think that needs to be progressed faster?
First of all, I have to personally admire and thank General Kurila and the good job that he's doing in the entire region. I think the CENTCOM is showing the projection of the US in the region. But I can bring the Yemen and put this Yemen as example. This is state or non-state organization that terrorize the entire region, that prevent the liberty of sail in the Gulf, that causes a lot of damage to the economy of the entire region. And I think he should be taken more aggressively in the early beginning, and of course now not to terrorize the region, the entire region, and Israeli, especially Israel. Of course, that Israel have no issues with the Yemen Houthis, and still they have the capability and attacking us on a weekly basis and project their deterrence on the entire Gulf and damage the entire world economy. So when I'm talking about cutting the grass, this is maybe the best example that I can give that is maybe out of the scope, but you have to take care of these blooming threats.
I just see there should be some credit given to Saudi Arabia and Jordan for their partake in what happened on Tuesday. I think they helped, and they're not being acknowledged. But that this has got to be, obviously there's some sensitivities here, but there is a team starting to develop for the defense, and it shouldn't just be for Israel. It's for all those countries need to work together. on that. So I think that's underground a little bit. It's getting some support that maybe they're not publicly acknowledging it, but it seems to be real.
Totally agree. I mentioned the need of the alliance. I mentioned the other countries' support, which I cannot refer directly, but it was not only the US forces. There were some other European forces and some other regional forces that I cannot refer specifically. And I think this is very important. And in the few of the things that I referred, I think we should be more aggressive than what we demonstrate so far in order to finish this conflict.
I think that's positive. I mean, this didn't happen 10 years ago, 5 years ago. You've got active participation in a team effort. So that's growing. And I hate to see the only way it grows is you get struck by 200 missiles. I mean, that's not the way to grow this, but that's what's happening because that's the necessity of what we're going. And I think it's also got to be on both sides. If one of them gets hit, that your support, it's a team game. So thank you for just a great discussion. I appreciate it, Shachar. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now we're going to shift over to the CENTCOM side, the American side of it. And in our country, the command of missile defense in each region of the world is under the Air Force. The Air Force controls that and commands that. So it's great to have the former deputy J3 of Air Force Operations, Corky, the best F-22 pilot I know, just a gifted individual. And for him to give us perspective from the air picture and his perspective as the command of this mission from the United States on the Air Force perspective. Corky, it's all yours.
Thanks, Riki. Apparently you only know one F-22 pilot.
I know a couple.
Hey, thank you for the work you continue to do at MDAA and for your entire team for putting on the event today. Thanks to my fellow panelists, Tal, Shachar, and JD for being here. Great comments so far, and I know JD is going to continue that when he gets his turn here in a minute. Riki, you said it up front. We live in a dangerous world, and it's becoming more dangerous. And I just want to highlight a couple of things that everybody's well aware of, but let's go ahead and state them up front. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, the Houthis are all working together. It's quite maddening to see, and we have to figure out, as was mentioned numerous times now, how do we restore deterrence? But just as of today, we're seeing reports that North Korean soldiers are now fighting in Ukraine and dying, along with North Koreans providing weapons to Russia. The Russians are cooperating with the Houthis to provide the munitions. Iran is providing munitions to Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and Russia. China supporting all of them behind the scenes. China, by the way, tried to make a deal with the Houthis. I don't know if our audience or everyone on the panel here saw this, but China was invited to be part of the joint multinational team to protect shipping lanes going through the straits there, and they decided no, they're not going to do that. They tried to make their own deal with the Houthis to allow Chinese ships to go through safely, but everybody else to continue to get attacked. Funny enough, the Houthis didn't agree to that, and they have attacked Chinese ships. But anyway, you see this group of malign actors continue to align against the Western world, and we've got to figure out how to push back against them and restore deterrence where it is not holding. It is holding in a few places. It's still holding in South Korea. It's still holding in NATO proper. China's escalating in the South China Sea, but we're still holding tight there. So. The perspective you told me to bring to this, what's the U.S. The U.S. role there as far as defending Israel and how we pull all that together? And I thought I'd approach this by talking a little bit, the football analogy we've used in the past. Your 49ers aren't going to show up at the game tonight and figure out what to do then. The game was won well before they got there, right? And so you look at that in the missile defense lens. It requires us to have an exquisite knowledge of the threat, to build and field systems, and to train to those systems, to be ready to use them, and then to execute when the kickoff happens, when the game the game happens. So, walking through that, Tal gave us a really great rundown of the threat. But Israel is facing everything from counter UAS, small UASs to cruise missiles to ballistic missiles to hypersonic missiles. I guess the good news is primarily coming from Iran. The only way they can get that far is these ballistic and some hypersonics. They do have some long-range one-way drones, but those aren't as tough to deal with as say rockets or drones coming from Hamas and Hezbollah. And so what we saw here in this strike particularly was these ballistic and hypersonics. But drilling down into that a little bit more, to defend ourselves properly, we need to have an exquisite understanding of the material, the systems themselves, and also the humans, right? And so that has taken, as was mentioned, decades of hard work to pull that together. We know the types of missiles, like we just saw briefed by Tal. We know what their capabilities are. We know where they're stored. We know what their weaknesses are, their strengths are. We know where they're launched from. All these kind of things have been built up over time, right? And then on the human side, we're looking at, hey, what kind of operators do they have? Where do their operators live and work? And how do they communicate? And what are their tactics, techniques, and procedures for launching these things? And then there's the leadership too of Iran. What are they saying? What are the indications and warnings they give up before they actually decide to attack? All those things allow us, that knowledge of the threat, to put in place our own, to build and field our own systems, to give us the indications and warnings we need, to put the forces out there we need in place, to train them, and then when and if an attack happens, to execute. So you think about the early warning architecture that we put in place to monitor all those things that Tal talked about, all those manufacturing places, all the storage places, all the practiced launches. So we got eyes on, whether it's from space, whether it's humans, whether it's radars, listen to comms, looking at things. And that is a tremendous benefit to us. It only works though if we share it across the team, right? So it's not US only. We share it with Israel. We share it with our like-minded partners over there who are consistently threatened by Iran. And we got to place sensors, around the area over there. And that again requires the willingness of partners to participate in this. So again, hats off to all those partners. And then our troops, our joint forces. You said the Air Force 3-star over there has command and control, but he doesn't own any of the systems. The Navy organized, trains, and equips. The Army organized, trains, and equips. And then the Air Force provides the C2 for the U.S. piece. And then we have to interact with the air and air defense forces of all those other partners we talked about, and then primarily Israel, which is the nation that's getting shot at. So that requires training, like was mentioned, Juniper Cobra, numerous other exercises that are ongoing, practice. So when and if the attack happens, you're ready to go. And then it's just on the individuals to execute. Execution requires all those systems to work, resilient, redundant, C2, et cetera. But when those systems don't work, the really asymmetric advantage we have with the Western way of war, the way the U.S. fights, the way Israel fights, the way many of our partners are, is we trust our operators at the lowest level, what we call mission command. We allow them, if they can't, they fall back on their training, bottom line, just like you did as a middle linebacker. You go and you get the job done, and you're trusted to do it, right? And so I think we saw all that work about as well as it could with this large volley that we recently saw come out of Israel. But as has been mentioned here, at the end of the day, deterrence failed. And we cannot sit back. Israel cannot sit back. The Western world cannot sit back and continue to take it on the chin. It's unaffordable and it's unacceptable. On the unaffordable side, you mentioned some math a little bit ago. We estimated in the comments here that Iran spent, a few $100 million on this strike potentially, right? Well, on the MDAA website, there's a list of how much it costs for every effector that we have in the U.S. inventory and some of our partners. And if you look at just the SM-3s, we fired 12 SM-3s. So that's somewhere between $100 and $325 million. So for the cost of the 12 SM-3s, Iran, that's what it cost for their entire strike. So great that stuff worked as well as it did, but we can't keep doing it. We can't afford it. And we have great systems, but we can't afford the capacity needed to continue to just take it on the chin like that and try to shoot everything down. On the unacceptable side, it's not acceptable for our morale, for our populace that we're defending. And it's not acceptable within international norms and standards. We have to figure out how to restore deterrence. You asked about deterrence a bit ago. It's a really simple equation. Iran's going to attack if they believe the benefits outweigh the costs. And right now, apparently, they believe the benefits outweigh the costs. So how do you get them to believe that the costs are more than the benefits, and therefore the next time their leaders start thinking about this, they think twice and they don't do it? The way that I think you're going to see that unfold is all those wonderful pictures we saw earlier of where they store things and where they can launch things from. I think that's going to be taken away from them. Look at what just happened in Ukraine, by the way. Last night, Ukraine took out a storage area that holds 400 to 500 drones, right, that came in from North Korea and Iran. They took that out rather than waiting for those 400 things to get launched at them, and they got to shoot them one by one. 3 weeks ago, they took out an armory in Russia where glide bombs and other missiles are stored. They're taking out factories where these things are put together. So all that is how you use strike to take out this stuff before it's shot at you. So you don't need the in-game effectors. And it all shows the adversary your willingness to take the fight to them if they continue this. Now, on the nuclear piece, I'll just end with this. You say, well, we do have to have this balance of how do we hit but not, force them down the path to World War III. Well, again, that would come back to the supreme leader in Iran or a Putin, if you're talking the Russian scenario. That comes down to them believing that, again, the benefits of going nuclear outweigh the costs of going nuclear. And that's a big gamble to take. But I just don't see how taking out Iran's ballistic missile launch capability, or how taking out Russia's glide bombs or one-way attack drone launch capability is going to push them to launching nuclear weapons against the free world. That's a big decision. It's a tough decision for our leaders to take, but that's one they're going to have to make. I'll stop there, Riki. Thanks.
Okay, just on your point, Russia has claimed production of 1.3 million drones this past year.
Mm-hmm.
That overmatch is off the charts.
Yep.
And they're working together. But I want to get right to the meat of this. If 200 missiles were fired at the United States, and we knew it was going to happen, we probably knew pretty damn close to when it was going to happen, why didn't we take the shot? Why didn't Israel take the shot? When's that going to happen? Before they even launch, or when they're launching and punish? So it looks like we accept it. I think how is the country accepting someone to fire 200 missiles on them and just rely on their defensive capabilities?
Well, go back to the 7 fronts that were mentioned earlier. And I think you're seeing a very methodical approach by Israel. Because if you take out Iran's ballistic missiles before you take out Hezbollah's ability to get at you, Hamas's ability to get at you, then how's Iran going to strike back? They're going to use those proxies. So what I think you're seeing is the cutting the grass with Hezbollah, cutting the grass with Hamas. And now you're going to take out Iran's capability to launch at you. And if you take out Iran's capability to launch their ballistic and hypersonics, they've got nothing left if you've already taken out Hamas's big arsenal and Hamas's leadership, along with Hezbollah and their leadership. So I think you're seeing a very methodical approach at taking out the proxies first and then taking out the big dog.
But they would have obviously, Corky, they would have known if 200 of those things were going into Jerusalem and whatever, I just don't understand why we're still accepting the strike. We're accepting it.
Yeah,
whatever way you see it.
These are policy choices, Riki. You're right. They're policy choices.
Okay, getting a little emotional about this, but
yeah,
it's real.
You're right.
And this is the form of warfare that's going to happen right now. That's around the world. This is what's going to happen. We just got to figure out how to deal with it. And it doesn't look like we're doing that very well by accepting.
And again, you gotta stop the production. You got to take out the storage, et cetera. There's a long piece this morning about the Russians are hiring basically slave labor out of South Africa and South Asian nations to come work in factories. These people don't know what they're getting pulled up there to do. And so you got to take out that supply chain. You got to take out the factory. You don't sit back and let them build a couple
I
hundred
got you,
million.
but we're not doing that, Coke. We're not doing it. So I understand that. Let me shift over to, because I know we're running a little short in time, but I'm gonna get over to JD, and JD's our newest member. was the senior analyst for the Indo-PACOM commander, and JD's got the expertise in the U.S. Navy system, being captain of the Hopper ship. And obviously, JD, I'm just going to start off with you before you get going. Is why in the heck did the Department of Defense, stop SM-3 Block 1B, completely stop it? And we're using 12 of those things, as Corky said today. But anyways, I don't want to get you tied into that, but go big. Give us your thought from the Navy perspective and the U.S. CENTCOM perspective as a COCOM on how this went last week.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. Thanks, Ricky. General Tiles, pleasure to be on the panel with y'all. Aloha, everybody watching this. A couple of comments. We're going to keep this kind of direct, just based on time. My exposure to this, even though I'm a primarily Indo-PACOM biased person, my actually first exposure to this problem set was in 2001 when the newest ship in the Navy, USS Porter, was doing tipping and queuing with our 1 Delta radar to Patriots stationed at Israel. So this information sharing, this queuing, this giving the heads up of point defense has been going on for almost 30 years, right? So as we look upon how we're sharing information, what type of information we're sharing, I would even offer, I don't think we have matured or evolved to be able to start addressing the capacity and the saturation that we're starting to see in the adversaries throw at us, right? I mean, we mentioned a few times in this conversation, 200 missiles within about 60 plus minutes, time of flight 10 minutes, 15 minutes. We have to start relying on this next generation of technology. I'm not talking about AI. I'm just talking about taking the way that we look through the world of passing information, the mechanism in which we do it, and we need to start evolving that to be able to start addressing the saturation point. I will just say from a Navy perspective that Indo-PACOM is unique with respect to how it uses the Aegis weapon system. As we're seeing here in CENTCOM and EUCOM, operations in the Red Sea and the Mediterranean, the Navy and Aegis are pretty much on the periphery, right? They're not in the middle of the fight. So this is an Army-centric or air-centric effort, and the Navy supporting on the sidelines, either with tipping and queuing, because you got ships in the Red Sea, you got ships in the Northern Arabian Gulf. All of that network, as Court was talking about, that all contributes to a focused engagement effort for the point defense. That information is being fed. So when we start talking about SM-3 Bravos or SM-3 engagements whatsoever, you have to picture the geography, right? The ships are in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and most of these engagements, SM-3 engagements, the system is saying whether or not I can hit it. So you're seeing some lobs, you're seeing some long-range shots that are happening, and having practiced the defense of Israel from B&B platforms, if the system says you can engage it and you have the authorities to engage it, you're going to light that Roman candle off, and that weapon is going to go do what it's supposed to do. So why do we shoot so few? I've seen some questions pop in ahead of time from the SM-3 perspective. It's geography. You're kind of slave to the geography of it. There's advancements that are happening. We're putting VLS capabilities into mobile launchers. We've seen some Roman candles being lit off through those containers. So we holistically, it's a combined effort that we're starting to move those remote launch capability further to where they need to be. So I just kind of want to put that out there, that the lessons learned that we see, especially from a Navy perspective in the periphery, supporting on the periphery, how can we change that, right? How can we take some really cool components of existing systems, put them into a different mesh, and have a more lethal outcome if we change the actual operating geography? I'll also add to, when we start talking about regional integrated air missile defense, we've hit it a few times in this conversation, but our allies have credible and content. They have the means of which to provide early warning, tipping and queuing, and even actively contributing to the fight. What we have to do is integrate, not coordinate, right? We have to truly integrate what they're seeing, the data that they're producing, into the means of delivering effects. And that could be Israeli system, that could be a Navy, a U.S. Navy, that could be an Army system. It doesn't matter, right? The point is to make engagements agnostic of the sensor. So a lot of it's policy, a little bit is the mechanism how we share that data, but we need to sit there and have an honest conversation about, how can we evolve the mechanisms of which we can take stuff sensing piece and actually turn to something that's contributing to the defense design, right? Defense in depth is real. Defense in depth provides deterrence, as we've seen. If we don't demonstrate defense in depth, multi-tier engagements, then we're just talking about it. And that reputational deterrence only lasts so long. So we have to go out there and demonstrate the ability to go out and touch somebody, reach somebody. And most people forget that integrated air missile defense has multiple disciplines in it. One discipline, the very first discipline, is offensive counter air, or the ability to strike left launch. And Corky mentioned it, right? We know we have the ability to go out and hurt people's feelings well left of launch. But where does that fit in the big mechanism of the entire defense design? The way that we're organized, the way that we coordinate, we have to start streamlining that process. There's some initiatives that are happening in OSD R&E that are trying to chip away at that. But I would offer the one mission area, the integrated air missile defense mission area, can do all that under one umbrella. So I just kind of put that out there. I know we're running low on time. I'll just pause right there for any more questions.
Yeah. Gainey, we'll go over a little bit, so we're good. I just want to make sure we get quality conversation here. But I'd like you to talk about the depletion of our capabilities with a low production rate of the capability, yet we're using U.S. missiles, or you're going to ask Saudi or Jordan to use their capability, yet they've got to be very conscious of keeping some stuff for themselves. And it's all great to talk about the team game here, but we got to increase the capacity. It just doesn't seem like we have lack of capacity across the board. And you can go right to SM3 Block 1B, or you can go to others, but that seems to be an issue. And is it getting cheaper stuff? With some of the expensive stuff, you have to have. You cheaper stuff can't do what some of that stuff can do, but you shouldn't be putting your expensive stuff on cheap stuff.
So yeah, we're two comments to that. One is energizing the industry base, and
well, why isn't it not energized? JD, why isn't that energized? Why is it not energized with all the stuff that's been going on?
Well, Riki, we are a budget informed resourcing entity, right? So money drives a lot of decisions we make. We can't. That's just the way we're set up. But our industrial base, they can be energized with competition. We're seeing up and coming companies like Inbar just put on contract for some limited anti-air capability. What do you think is going to happen whenever a company that uses modern tech, the 3D printing, dispersed supply chain input, it's going to start giving the big industry folks a run for their money, and they should, right? So that's a way we can keep rewarding that type of behavior for the up and comings. The other part of that is we have to be smart with the way we engage. Call it engagement discipline, right? We can't just sit there and if we have the ability to shoot something, just go ahead and shoot it, right? Because that's the way we do coordinated air defense right now. If you have the ability to knock it out of take the threat out, we'll take the threat out and we'll keep working our way down to the defended area. But we need mechanisms and we need compute to tell us, you know what, SM3 can shoot it, but you have a higher chance of probability of successful kill if you wait, right? And so the way we calculate and compute it has to evolve as well and incorporate engagement discipline. Now you start talking about emotions, right? You're really going to let a missile fly by from an engagement platform when you have a higher probability kill when it gets closer to the target? The answer is yeah. I mean, you're gonna have to do that, but that's going to take time and some methodology to be able to demonstrate.
Okay, thank you. Let's open it up for some questions. Now, let me just start with Tal or Corky. You have any discussion points you want to hit with everybody before we open up to the public?
I'm good, Ricky. Thanks.
Okay.
Just a short comment, Riki. When we hold such an event after the April attack on Israel, I said that this is just the first type of direct attack from Iran, and I completely agreed with Shachar that there is a problem of deterrence, because there was eventually the deterrence didn't work. And we also agreed that the second time will be different from the first time, and this was demonstrated last week. And a retaliatory strike from Israel is on the table, as we all know and aware, and it is also delivered by the heads of our government. So a counterstrike from Iran, the third strike on Israel, is just something that we have to expect. And it will be different as well. And I also want to further emphasize that we are in the beginning of a new era in ballistic missiles, regional ballistic missiles, short-range hypersonic missiles, which are no theoretical threat anymore. They are here, and they are here to stay. So we have to cope with them with adequate defense.
Tal, what's your best professional opinion on what that third strike will be from Iran? Just throw it out there.
I don't want to give some operational ideas to Iran, but I just want to all of us to remember that we saw only a tiny fraction of the Iranian arsenal, not just in terms of quantities, but in terms of the types of missiles that Iran possesses at the moment. So there are heavy, very heavy missiles like the Khorram Shah, which is actually a derivative from the HS-10 from North Korea, with several tons of capabilities to carry out even more than one re-entry vehicle in one missile. And we didn't see any use of what Iran is claiming to be also hypersonic, but just in terms of speed, not in maneuverability, but the Shahed Haj Qasem with a range of something like 1,400 to 1,500 kilometers, but a re-entry speed of Mach 15. So it is a very capable weapon, at least in my view. And there are some more. So speaking about the quantities, I just want all of us to remember that Iran launched all the missiles above the ground, but they also have some launching capabilities beneath the ground. So the time for getting all the, let's say, all the intelligence needed to understand that attack is coming might be much shortened in the future, unless, as a preemptive measure, those underground missile cities, like Iran is calling them, will be mitigated.
Yeah, I guess I'll pile on that there. We absolutely have to be ready for a third strike. But our hope is that the strike, if it eventually happens from Israel, is such a deterrent that Iran will stop. And you see right now in open press, Iran is trying to deter the other regional actors from supporting Israel. You've probably seen those reports telling the Gulf states, you will pay. The costs will outweigh the benefits if you allow Israel to use your airspace, for example, or you cooperate in any way in an Israeli strike on us. So they're trying to deter, Iran is trying to deter the other Gulf states from supporting a strike by Israel. So it will be very interesting to see how this plays out. But at the end of the day, Iran has to be put back in a box. Right now, they are not deterred. Deterrence needs to be restored.
So we can safely assume the third strike's going to be overmatched, whatever that is. But I do want to comment, Al. It's just interesting because the overmatch is one way of deterrence from their perspective. But let's just look at China, who threw an ICBM for the first time in 40 years. Nobody's talking about that. That was 2 weeks ago. That went longer than any of our ICBM tests ever. They did that, but it's hush hush on the reaction to that. But going back to this, that 9 Mach, 10 Mach missile, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, that flew right through everybody's defenses, the hyper that landed. Can anybody comment on that? Anybody want to comment on that?
There was one claim of a hypersonic missile coming from Yemen, and it was not a totally successful interception. Let's state it like this. But I recall, Riki, when we were in Berlin in 2018, we spoke about the dangerous threats from Yemen at a briefing for NATO. And some people thought we are just speaking about something like science fiction, but it's now reality. So the proxies of Iran is also an issue. In that regard, we saw a very resolute Israeli decision to strike Yemen twice, at least for now. But I think Yemen is not deterred yet, because just last night we saw actually a very interesting interception of UAV coming from Yemen to Iraq, and we saw another type of missile defense or aerial defense carried out by an Israeli Navy ship. So yeah, we have to invest more in the defense capabilities, and there is no such thing as 100% successful and hermetic defense. This is a fact of life.
Hey, JD, if you can just take a couple questions from the public or whatever to pass around, and then we'll close.
There's a couple that are focused really on the policy piece of it. I think we've touched around it, but the policy implications to how we respond from a U.S. perspective and our treaty ally requirements, are these going to change in the near term or have any type of policy implications? Because I've seen about 3 or 4 of those questions come through.
Go ahead, Court.
Well, we're speculating, all right, but very interesting that we find all this happening right in the middle of a U.S. presidential election in the home stretch, right? I think that's, whether it should be or not, is probably certainly weighing heavily on the Biden-Harris administration. And I don't know that a Trump administration would be acting any differently as far as the decisions they're weighing, because at the end of the day, when these folks get into office, they're all facing the same world, whether they're Republican or Democrat. And at the end of the day, I think if we do not stand strong and steady with not only Israel, but the rest of our partners in that region, this Pandora's box is only going to open more. So I think right now is the time to be as tough as we can possibly be towards Iran.
I would just add on to that, JD, that we've made a mistake in policy in Ukraine. We have limited our abilities, or whatever nations that donate weapons into Ukraine to strike into Russia, where Russia is shooting from. And we slowly open that up, but we always get threatened by Putin's nuclear threat, and he bluffs, and we slowly, and so we've seen this for the last 2 years. And that's got to change. You got to change the policy to allow yourself, or allow any country, including Israel, to be able to strike where that strike's coming from into their country. It just seems absurd that we don't allow that. We don't allow that. It's crazy.
Couldn't agree more, Ricky. And you think a nuclear strike by Putin is going to cause the Western, the NATO alliance to come apart, or you think it's going to further galvanize it? I would say it would galvanize, right? Not only NATO, but the rest of the world who was even hush hush didn't condemn him in the first place. I think a nuclear strike by Putin will be the end of Putin's regime, and I think he knows that. We need to stand up to him. We need to stand up to the Iranians.
All right, some other questions about capacity in logistics. And the overall theme is, do we believe that the defense and supporting the defense of Ukraine and also Israel is going to deplete what capacity the U.S. has for future endeavors? That's a pretty consistent one. I'll take a swing at it if you don't mind. We know how to make the missiles. We know how to make the interceptors. It comes down to, are there other options to include operating constructs that we should go and revisit and challenge to make the interceptor, especially the kinetic, more affordable? Right? There's different operating geographies that we probably assumed away that we should no longer assume away. There's been discussions about operationalizing the stratosphere as an example for using that type of platform mechanism. Until either tragedy or failure happens from a United States perspective, I don't think you'll see any motivation to increase that capacity. I'll turn it over to my panelists.
Yeah, I think it would be borderline criminal to withhold weapons, to withhold effectors from either Israel or Ukraine because of our capacity issues. We need to build more, and we need to rethink how we're using them, like you just said, JD, and we need to restore deterrence. We need to go on the offense. But we can't sit back and not defend Israel or Ukraine or try to make a choice between the two and try to kid ourselves that that's going to make the world a safer place. These aggressors got to be stopped, and it's better to stop them in Ukraine and over there where they're trying to attack Israel than to sit back and wait for them to attack the United States or some other
ally. From the questions perspective, I think we've hit on all the rest of them. So I think from the audience, we're in a good place. Rick,
let's do closing remarks. It's been a really good discussion. So I'll leave it. Let's start with Tal.
So I think that, like we said, we have to improve the defense. We saw that regional defense worked for the second time in the region. So another round will be requiring more coordination. I don't know if it should be some kind of unofficial signing ceremony for this regional defense, but it sure does work. And I don't know if it's optimistic or realistic, but I'm sure that we will meet again discussing Israeli retaliatory action and the counterstrike by Iran should Iran will retain its capabilities in terms of launching more missiles in the future. And just want to also mention that we saw some news from Iranian sources that members of the Iranian parliament urged the leadership to reconsider their posture on the nuclear weapons. So if this will be the case, we are talking about a whole new game in the region.
Riki?
Thanks again for hosting, Ricky. Thanks, JD, Tal, and Shachar for your outstanding comments today. Thanks to the audience for tuning in. Teamwork makes the dream work, and the team did well here once again with as this strike unfolded. And as we discussed, it took years to get to where we're able to do that, right? Lots of trust training and teamwork, fielding the systems, training on the systems, gaining exquisite intel. We need to debrief ourselves. We need to keep trying to get better. We need more capacity, like you said, on defense, Riki, and it needs to be more affordable capacity. That's the only way we're going to get to more of it. And we also need to really look hard at our policy choices, because we cannot allow these bad actors to keep lashing out. We must restore deterrence. Thanks.
JD.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. It was enlightening for me. I'll also offer that as we see missile defense in action with the videos and the pictures, we need to go back and kind of challenge some assumptions that we made. Examples: post-intercept debris is real, right? I've sat through the briefs where industry would come in and will say, hey, our effectors will just vaporize the threat. Well, no, we're seeing that's not the case. And if we're not honest about what post-intercept debris looks like, or regional IMD integrated missile defense looks like, or mechanisms to share data and support each other, then we're wasting this opportunity. We're not using it as a learning mechanism. So it's a privilege to be here and an honor to support this panel.
Thank you, JD. Thank you for each of you and Shachar to enlighten and educate on this very delicate issue that's not really been out there in the public. I mean, they shape it in different directions, and this was some pure candor and honesty. The facts are that this is a victory from our perspective because the defense worked, but that's the problem here. Everybody else is watching this, and we have to be able to do better than what we just did. And we have to do it combined and not be afraid of being a combined team wherever you're at versus the 4 countries that are threatening everybody. This has to develop and evolve quickly, fastly, in creating a coalition of the willing. That's unacceptable to do this. And yes, you have to get capacity up. There's no question that is absolutely necessary, because they're attacking infrastructures and they're going to continue to attack infrastructure. And this has to be a lesson. We have to do it because guess what? It's coming to our country. It's coming to the United States. And we are not even close to what Ukraine has, or what Israel, not even close to defend our population, defend our infrastructure across our entire country. In Hawaii, in Guam, we're not there because we don't spend money on missile defense at all. We spend less than 1%, 1.5% of our budget. And it's the Department of Offense. And the populations of every one of these nations deserve their tax dollars, their governments, to defend them first and foremost. And that's going to have to be addressed across this world because it's common. And we've seen it. So thank you for the discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Have a great day. And God bless. Thank you.